So yesterday there was an interview that started making the rounds online, and it seemed to have a person from Sony maybe teasing the idea of new hardware for next year with PlayStation. That's outside of PlayStation VR 2 that we already know is coming in the first couple of months in 2023. Now, this seems to more or less line up with maybe a new PlayStation console. And of course, this got people talking quite a bit as to what could this be. And yes, that did once again lead to a PlayStation 5 Pro. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about this here today because, you know what, I'm not really sure what people would expect out of a Pro system. Guys, if you enjoy this video, make sure that like button. And if you're new to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Let's head over here very quickly to PlayStation Lifestyle, who had the excerpt here from the interview, and they had it translated. I also want to point out that this is machine translated, I believe, and I've always been hesitant to look at it as this is absolutely the meaning and what they said and all this, because sometimes things can be lost in translation, obviously. But it was very clear that the person who did the interview with Famitsu Magazine was specifically bringing up the PlayStation 4 Pro. So there, obviously some parallels there that could be drawn going into year 3 of the PlayStation 5. But this was with Hideki Nishino, a Sony Senior VP of Platform Experience, who would obviously know quite a bit about what's going on when it comes to producing another PlayStation system. But when asked specifically about year 3, where with the PS4 generation, we had a PlayStation 4 Pro and a PlayStation 4 Slim, by the way, those released within 2 months of each other during that holiday season, there were questions about what could happen here going into the third year for the PS5. According to the translation, they said by the end of fiscal 2022, which I think that would be like, I think they're off by a year because I think that's already wrapped up. But anyway, by the end of fiscal 2022, cumulative sales will exceed 37 million units. And we believe that it will be a very important time for the platform as well. I won't be able to talk about specifics at this time, but I hope you will look forward to next year, 2023. So obviously people are pulling a tease for new hardware from this because they didn't just go, yeah, we don't really have anything new in terms of hardware for the PlayStation console plan. They kind of skated around the question a bit and like, hey, look forward to 2023 where we'll have something new to release. And this, again, is separate from the PlayStation VR 2, as they have an entire section in the interview all about the new VR headset from Sony. So now the conversation has come to, is this something that would be a PlayStation 5 Pro, or is this something that would be a PlayStation 5 Slim model? And some people are calling for a PS5 Pro out of this. Maybe it's because it lines up with year 3 of the PS4. But you have to really think about the history with Sony overall. That's the only time they've really done a Pro system, like at all. That was it. It was the PS4 Pro in 2016, that being 3 years after the PS4 itself released. And that was kind of a strange situation for not only Sony, but also Microsoft. The adoption for 4K was pretty quick. Like, if you look at the start of the generation in 2013, not as much. It was mostly about 900p versus 1080p. You fast forward 2 years, all of a sudden people are talking about having 4K sets in their house, and they're like, what's going on with this PS4 and this Xbox One system? Are they going to have support for 4K? And then obviously by 2017 or 2018, after the One X and the PS4 Pro were out, seemed like 4K TVs were everywhere. The other thing you have to remember with the PS4 Pro, Sony also sells TVs, right? They sell many, many things, but they obviously push entertainment in the form of TV, soundbars, accessories, that sort of thing. And the PlayStation is something they like to pair with it. So if you have TVs that are 4K, but you have this base PlayStation 4 that cannot output 4K, it kind of throws a wrench into their marketing and tying this ecosystem together. So they did at least have a reason to push forward with a PlayStation 4 Pro at the time to enable 4K and tie everything up nicely. And obviously Microsoft was playing this out too, but I feel like that PS4 Pro probably pushed them a bit more to get that Xbox One X out a year later. But for this generation, the PS5 already supports 4K. In fact, if you look on the outside of the box, it says 8K. We'll see about that one. But it seems like at this time, we're all pretty set with 4K. Like, I don't know a lot of people who are calling necessarily for gaming at 8K. We're still trying to figure out 4K 60. And I guess that's what the push could be for a PS5 Pro, would be 4K 60. Although I don't really know how you market that well if you're Sony, because 3 years in, you'd basically be saying that your current system is a piece of junk and can't do 4K 60, but this one can do 4K 60. Frame rate is one of the hardest things, by the way, from what I can see, to market to mass consumers. Resolution's easy because we have logos, symbols, marketing, 1080p, 4K. That stuff is a bit easier to put out there in front of them and try to explain why they need this thing, which I think is one of the reasons 8K just hasn't caught on much. There just isn't a lot of media that would take advantage of it in the first place. I guess for a PS5 Pro, you could go with ray tracing, although once again, kind of hard to market ray tracing because I feel like we're in a position now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, most people probably turn that off because they understand the performance hit that you take with ray tracing. It's very obvious at times when the frame rate gets cut in half even to account for what people currently look at as better reflections on the skyscraper in something like Spider-Man, or the puddles are a bit shinier in Watch Dogs. For the most part, at least for me, I'd prefer to just have the frame rate sitting at 60 rather than have shinier objects on screen and go down to, say, 30 frames. And the other part is this generation is off to a slower start. Yes, we're heading into year 3. We've completed 2 years of the current systems. It doesn't really feel like it. Kind of feels like we've been in this cross-generation phase, or even this phase where you can't find the system at all. And maybe as we go into year 3 and we start to see Sony push more towards PlayStation 5 only when it comes to development, and Microsoft pushing towards their Xbox Series systems as their primary support, kind of leaving Xbox One behind at this part, as you'd expect them to, then it might feel more and more like we're finally into the generation. They're available pretty easily, and we're getting games at a pretty good clip, specifically from the platform holders themselves, right? From these very talented studios that should know the hardware better than anyone else. Then maybe you could start talking about what's next for the systems. But to be honest, that'll probably be like 5 years in. And as I figured, this is going to be a longer generation. I kind of think we're right now with the PS5 and the Xbox Series in an 8 to 10 year console generation. So sure, 5 years in, maybe we start to hear about some sort of revision to push it just over that finish line to 10 years. But 3 years in, I believe, is too early. But that's not to say I don't think we will see new hardware next year, because I believe we will. In fact, I think Sony is preparing their PlayStation 5 Slim model. Who knows what they call it, the PS5S, something along those lines, with a different model on the back so they can differentiate it. Most likely, this is the system that's been rumored from Tom Henderson at Inside Gaming about this detachable disk drive. And the PS5, I guess, being a bit smaller or slimmer. And they've been working towards this for a while now. Very quietly, though. Inside the PlayStation 5, they've been making several changes and iterations. And this is something that happens throughout every console generation. But Sony does it more than anyone. The PS2, I'm not even kidding, is like 15 different systems. The PS3 has a ton as well. And what they do is they just work to alter and change the fabrication as well as the parts that are going into the system to, yes, save money on it so they can make more money at the end. And what better way to save money on a system that currently has 2 SKUs with a PS5 digital and a PS5 disc-based unit than to only have to make 1 SKU, but still be able to sell 2 different systems technically. And that's the idea going into this, and why it makes so much sense, to where you have a base system, and if you want the disk drive, you buy it separately, and that's sort of it. It probably won't have any extra performance benefits to it or anything there, as that won't be the main driving force. Instead, what they'll probably advertise is that the PS5 is $400. That'll probably be it. And if you want the disk drive, it's just a separate accessory that's not necessarily part of the overall console price. So in some ways, they could actually advertise this as a price drop in the long run. Yeah, that might be a way they try to market this thing and really push it out there to people. It'll also allow them to really streamline their production lines because they're only making one system, and they don't have to try to figure out how many digital PS5s do we need, how many disc-based PS5s do we need, because as someone who had to order different models of systems from a retail side, that was a big enough headache. I can't imagine how bad it is when you have to produce the things from a factory level and figure out how many you need of each one so you don't leave too many sitting on the shelves. Also, I guess the added benefit could be if you have an all-digital PS5 right now, maybe the disk drive will work on yours with the USB port on the back, and you can just kind of plug it in and then have access to used PlayStation 5 games without having to go and buy a whole other system. I do want to point out one other thing, though, with the idea that Sony is probably about to push with this slim PlayStation 5 system, and that is to get people more and more used to the idea of, yes, digital games, because out of the box, it won't come with a disc drive. You'll have to buy it separately or have it bundled in. So you will, once again, be pushed towards Sony mostly having control of the market, as they don't allow their digital games to be sold by retailers in the form of those cards. They started wiping that out a couple of years ago, and it's kind of flown under the radar a bit. And I think that's something we're going to see with the PlayStation 6 when that comes out in, I don't know, 2027 or 2028, something like that. It'll just be an all-digital system. We won't have any more Blu-ray drives attached. Anyway, I just wanted to get some of my thoughts out there around this as the PS5 Pro is, like I said, coming up. Wanted to give a more realistic take on what we're probably going to see so people don't set themselves up for like some 20 teraflop monster PS5 Pro or something, and then, oh, look, it's a smaller PS5 with an optional disc drive, because, yeah, that would lead to quite a bit of disappointment. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. And I've already brought up several things that the PS5 Pro could do to maybe improve over the current one, but really, I'm trying to figure out what they would build the PS5 Pro for, so let me know your best thoughts in the comments. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.